detective, riddle speak, but good-natured, happy, puzzle brain on when we read the Old Testament, just like we do when we read Jesus' parables. Now, let me go back, because so far I believe I have quite seriously mischaracterized the Old Testament. Now, I've mischaracterized it the way most Christians do, but I think I have mischaracterized it. I read from the book of Micah these scary, nasty, negative verses about, I'm going to do this and do this and do that. Basically, it amounts to I'm going to come and squash you like a bug because you're being bad, right? That's basically what it comes down to. All different words to say that. If that is the essence of the Old Testament, I think we have gotten our Old Testament wrong. We might ask the question, well then, why did God use that kind of language? And again, we've talked about this before, and Will, I'm glad you got here late, because Will has mentioned to me a couple times that if I could just take 30 seconds and tell about kids in the street. When they're little, what do we do? As Will's put it very well. This is Old Testament.
What we were talking about is the difference in the way
Go.
The way that a parent speaks to a young child by way of command, not just to lay down the law, but because of a reason. Johnny, don't go across the street unless Mama or I are with you. But how ridiculous would it be for my 23-year-old son to be standing out in the front yard and say, Justin, don't go across the street unless Mom or I are with you. Right. It's the exact same words, but it's out of the context of the state of the relationship and the maturity of the individual. And I think in the same way, God spoke to humankind in a particular way when, in a spiritual sense, collectively, we were very young in our understanding, and we were very young in the revelation we had received from God. That was law. And it was there not just to be arbitrary, but to keep us safe, in a sense, spiritually speaking. But what has happened since the cross is, we are now like the 23-year-old. We've reached the age of majority, if you will. Now it's up for us to decide, and it would be silly for my dad to be saying, Will, don't do this or don't do that, this kind of thing, the way he did when I was a child.
Yeah.
And so God with us.
Yeah. And when the little child hears mom or dad say, we're afraid our kid's going to run in the street, so the father or the mother opens the front door and puts on a tone of voice, right? And how does that sound to the kid?
It sounds at very least commanding and maybe a little scary.
Yeah, it's scary. Mom and dad are mad at me. Sounds harsh. It sounds downright Old Testament-ish.
Yes.
You see? So that doesn't answer the whole question, but that's, I think, a big part of it, is God spoke to the human race in the only language they could understand. And last week or the week before I talked about, we look back at the Old Testament and it was, in a lot of ways, horrid. Sacrificing sheep. I mean, today, if there was some cult sect somewhere in the mountains of North Carolina sacrificing animals, we would rightly think those people are crazy. But we read the Old Testament, and they did it like crazy. We don't think they're crazy. So we do, because God was working with a generation. It was bad religion, but it was better than what came before that. And that was better than what came before that. And that was better than what came before that. You see? So this crazy notion I'm calling the evolution of God is it's not God who's changing, but it's we are changing in our relationship with Him. Okay, a couple hands. Marla.
I don't really have a problem interpreting the Old Testament because I can see it through the lens of Jesus. It's the things in the New Testament.
Yes.
Such as, if I think of
Yes.
Who said that?
Second Peter, the second chapter, when he's talking about false prophets, and he says, if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but that sent them to hell, putting them into gloomy dungeons to be held for judgment. I don't know what version this is.
Yeah.
If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, then he goes through Sodom and Gomorrah, protecting Lot. If this is so, then the Lord knows how to rescue godly men from trials, and to hold the unrighteous for the day of judgment while continuing their punishment. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desire of the sinful nature and despise authority. And he describes what those people are like.
What passage,
They are
Marla?
like-
Second
Second Peter,
Peter.
the second chapter.
2 Peter 2.
Skipping down to verse 13. They will be paid back with harm for the harm they have done. Their idea of pleasure is to carouse in broad daylight. They are blots and blemishes, reveling in their pleasures while they feast with you. And he keeps going on with the description of these people. These men, gosh. Anyway.
It would be better for them not to have known the way of righteousness
Yeah.
than having known it to turn away. It has happened to them according to the true proverb, a dog returns to its own vomit.
Yeah. Oh, and then it keeps going into chapter 3, finally down in verse 7 of chapter 3, it says, they're being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men.
Woohoo! Good questions all. And we won't get there this week much, so maybe we'll have to continue that. Because, yeah, I agree. Or to summarize it, so we've learned to deal, we're going to learn maybe how to deal with the Old Testament. We're still left with a huge question, and it especially has to do with the book of Revelation. And 2 Peter is really close to Revelation. It looks like God's back to his old ways in the book of Revelation. And he's stomping and squashing and killing everybody because he's mad. So we'll have to resolve that as well. Which we spent a lot of time in Revelation, but yes. On top of that, it gets worse. The plot thickens. Good.
My study is, oh God, why? And I see this in the New Testament is in Romans, verse 18, chapter 1, 18 all the way to 32. And just crying out to the Lord for understanding. Why do you say this when I'm dealing with this situation in my life? So, yet God is love, God is all this, and I'm just back and forth. So that in Romans, it just confuses me.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I understand. Good. Hold those. Don't dismiss them. Keep them in our minds. Okay, but what about the New Testament? Let me go back and talk about the Old Testament just a little bit more. So I've already said, I think there's kind of a riddle going on in the Old Testament. And here's my quick, we're almost running out of time, so here's my quick proof that this is true. That the Old Testament is not all that it seems to be. And one of my primary reasons for thinking that is that throughout the Old Testament, there were individuals or there were seasons, there were people who broke through the kind of stuff we read this morning from in Micah. There were people who punched through that, saw through it, if you will, and touched the true heart of God. And Vernon, that's why we like the Psalms, most of them, so much, is because David was the numero uno. He was the main man in the Old Testament who saw through this blood and thunder surface and punched through into the loving, eternal, inside heart of God. And that's what shines through. Now, there's still a bunch of Psalms we have trouble with, smash them and kill them and stuff like that that give us pause. Let me go back to Micah just for a minute, just to make the point, because I started out in Micah. Let me go back there. Zephaniah, Haggai, Zephaniah, right before Zephaniah, right? Amos, Jonah, Micah, Amos. Micah after Jonah. There we go. So I read some from chapter 1 this morning. What happens if we get on to chapter 4? So and this won't surprise you. You're going to go, oh yeah, that's right. Because the same prophet that says, right, is going to come in chapter 4 and say, and it will come about in the last days that the mountain of the house of the Lord will be established as the chief of the mountains. I don't know what that means, but it sounds kind of good. It will be raised above the hills. And the peoples, listen to this, and the peoples, plural, that means the nations, will stream to it. And many nations will come and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us about his ways, and we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law, even the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he will judge between many peoples and render decisions for mighty distant nations. They will hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up its nation again. The sword against nation never let it train for war, etc., etc. There's always more.